Hi everyone, it's Ash from FPL Hints here with my team selection, game week preview, and captaincy analysis for game week 2. As always, if you're able to like, share, and subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated. If you want to buy me a coffee, the link will be in the description below. So let's get straight into it. And here is my confirmed team for game week 2. I don't anticipate in making any more changes because I've already made my transfer. So in goal, I've got Flecken, of course, I've got Valden as my sub 1, so I'm kind of locked in with the Brentford goalkeeping combo until I use my next wildcard. And just as a reminder, I know that this is a tricky match, but then you look at the fixtures ahead as well for Brentford, and you've got Southampton in game week 3, West Ham in game week 6, Wolves in game week 7 as well. So yeah, there are a couple of red block games as well, but I'm fairly happy with that combination. And from all the 4.5 combinations in game week 1, Flecken was the highest scoring one. And on a points per million basis, I want to just remind you of that as well, that he costs 1 million less than Edison. If he can get 4 points and Edison gets 6 points, well, clearly Flecken is getting more from the points per million standpoint. Onto the defence now for game week 2. Starting Burn, I know there's still some ongoing transfer saga and talks with Gahey potentially joining Newcastle United. With Burn, he's got that flexibility and adaptability that can play a bit out wide or centrally as well. I think eventually his X-Mins could be an issue, and I'm kind of gutted I didn't have Lewis Hall or Livramento from the upside, so I kept it safe and boring, as it were. But yeah, fairly content with him. Bournemouth, of course, have now sold Dom Solanke. They did score late on against Nottingham Forest, so it will be a tough match on the road. Hopefully, opportunity for a clean sheet, but it won't be the end of it if he can't do that. And then on to my transfer now. Anthony Robinson, someone who actually I did own once last season for that infamous free hit blank game week. He was my sub 3 and he scored 12 points that time. And with him in particular, what really stands out to me is that the number of fantasy returns he kept last season, and also the green block games, first of all. So Leicester at home, Ipswich away, so 2 newly promoted teams back to back. Then West Ham at home gets a bit trickier. Then Newcastle, I'd say that's more of a red block game. And then Nottingham Forest, another tricky fixture there as well. But really, what stands out for me and him as a 4.5 option is the number of clean sheets that Fulham kept were fairly respectable last season. So they kept about 9, as we can see there. And then you add that up to the number of assists he got for a 4.5 million defender, he got 6. So Anthony Robinson at 4.5 million got 15 fantasy returns. And with the generous run of games, you look at the options that are available. I know that some have gone for Rico Lewis. I had to sell Quansah before the price drop, and it's something that I made clear when it became apparent that was going to happen, that I'm going to switch him out. And the options really at hand were Rico Lewis, X-Men's issue still for Man City. I've got no doubt he'll probably start against Ipswich and do quite well, but then beyond that, I wanted longevity in my team. I don't want to make unnecessary transfers, and the Quansah one was a bit of a risk. I actually was going to get Robinson potentially in, but then because I've got such a, shall we say, light defence, I wanted to make sure I could have a potential start. And Quansah, at that time, I felt that, yeah, potential X-Men's issue, but of all my defenders, he was the one I was willing to take a risk on. But look, he's gone, and Robinson has come in. And then Harwood Bellis might surprise many that I've actually already gone sub 3 deep in by game week 2. So with my bench, I've got Mikalenko at the moment, who's got a tricky match away to Spurs. But then with Harwood Bellis, I thought, you know what? There aren't that many matches I'm going to start him in. I'm not really relying on him. But then I thought, what am I going to do? Am I going to start Mikalenko, who conceded 3 goals at home to Brighton? Or am I going to start Harwood Bellis and a Forest team who just scored 1 in their opening game? So yeah, I wouldn't start him against Brentford. But with this particular lineup and the matches at hand, I'm fairly content with starting him. It's almost like a one-off type thing. And it was actually the reason why I bought Harwood Bellis over Wout Weiss, and also Barco. Barco obviously has now become a rotation risk, but with Wout Weiss, there weren't that many green block games. So onto the midfield now. Anthony Gordon, away to Bournemouth. I've got no doubt that could have even have nicked a fantasy return had Newcastle not gone down to 10 men in that opening fixture. And Kunku, so much to prove, and he is someone who I'm keeping an eye on in terms of X-Mins and performances as well. If I was being polite, he had somewhat of a mixed match against Man City. I think he had that one really good opportunity, but then he kind of like fell on the floor in the penalty box. But Nkunku really has to prove himself in this match. Otherwise, ideally, I'd want to roll the free transfer, but then I might be forced into potentially selling him as well. Then I've got the Liverpool double up of Diogo Jota and Mohamed Salah. So that triple up is no more with the exit of Quansah from my team. And had I not done that last night, then I literally would have either been forced to hope that he gets minutes against Brentford, or I'd have to like literally buy another 4.0, which I can't do because I've already got two, and it'd be weird having three 4.0 defenders. So Jota and Mohamed Salah, hopefully the same as they did last weekend. And then a strike force of Havertz, who remarkably was able to cover Saka in that opening game. And let's see how many of those he can do. I mentioned it as well that, look, I could have got Saka in, but then I probably would have had to have gone to Wood as a striker. And with hindsight, I probably could still do that on a wild card potentially. But I just felt that from the points per million basis as well, I wanted to make it work by having Jota, Salah, and Havertz as opposed to Saka and Wood as my other options there. And then Haaland and Isak. Of course, Haaland has got that very favourable fixture against Ipswich. So makes complete sense to have him as a captaincy option. And of course, I will be coming on to my captaincy analysis in a moment as well. And then onto my bench, Valdemarson to cover Flecken, Winks as my sub one. Fairly content it's not a 5.0 or a 5.5 who could potentially hemorrhage points on the bench. Like I've said, you do need to have a good bench in FPL, but I just lost far too many points last season, so I wanted to keep it as cheap and cheerful as possible. So hopefully Winks will be my 2-point option as and when required on an emergency. Got Mikalenko, who again, because of the red block game, couldn't really start him against Spurs, so willing to take the punt on Harwood Bellis. And then he's also got the red block game against Aston Villa, so I need to sort that situation out as well. Then back to a green game in game week 3, and then Johnson against Man City. I think Johnson got a yellow card after he came off from the bench. Really, what can I hope? I hope he gets starts eventually, so I could potentially bump him up to sub 1 status. And if he's playing out of position, even risk starting him in games. But right now, he's not in the John Lundstrom category, unfortunately. So doing his job as a sub 1, doing his job as a sub 3, and I hope that he can get more starts. So on to the fixtures now for game week 2 to preview the games ahead. So there's no Friday night game this time around. We go straight to the lunchtime kickoff. Brighton against United. We're already getting flashbacks from 4 years ago of this fixture when Bruno Fernandes had that controversial penalty after the whistle was blown when VAR intervened. And for Bruno owners in particular, they really hope that he can step up once again after a disappointing blank. We really should have scored against Fulham. Brighton, on the other hand, absolutely smashed Everton to smithereens. Wasn't really expecting that. Thought there'd be a bit of transition, it'll be a tighter match. But I think that they'll cancel each other out in this fixture, and I'll call it a draw. On to the next fixture, Crystal Palace against West Ham. Palace, who've obviously sold Elise, very unlucky not to get another goal against Brentford on Sunday afternoon. And there's talks of Anderson potentially moving to Fulham. So that's potentially going to unsettle them slightly. And you've got West Ham. Now with them, they have brought in some new players for this season as well. But at the same time, I kind of feel that there's more questions and answers with West Ham as well. I kind of feel that London derby, they'll probably just cancel each other out with a draw. On to Fulham against Leicester. just on Leicester in particular, I literally watched that match from start to finish, and the observations I had from that match was that despite Spurs being all over Leicester, Leicester defended remarkably well to just make sure that that scoreline was kept to a draw and to have not conceded more than one goal. Obviously, Vardy got his chance and then he made the most of it. I think he literally had two clear-cut chances, and the last one, he of course scored. The midfield seemed just really soft, really. So not sure how that's going to hold up. If they've of course have signed Skip as well. So yeah, I mean Leicester in patches played remarkably well, but they need to hit the ground running in this Fulham match because Fulham at home can be a formidable force, and of course they've got Muniz in their attack as well, fairly robust midfield as well. So I'll call that a Fulham win, and hopefully with a clean sheet as well because I've got Anthony Robinson. On to the next match, Man City against Ipswich. Clearly, this effectively almost seems like a walkover. Ipswich actually, in fairness, in part did reasonably well against Liverpool, but I think Man City are going to have too much firepower against the Tractor Boys, and ultimately this could easily end up 4-5-6-0. Take your pick. So Haaland is captaincy option for many for that specific reason as well. On to the next fixture, Southampton against Nottingham Forest. Really should have scored, and they failed to capitalise on it. Then you've got Nottingham Forest, who've obviously we've mentioned got a run of green block games and some very interesting players to their advantage as well, with Elanga, Hudson-Odoi, Gibbs-White, Chris Wood as well. I'm not sure what we're going to see with Southampton at home, but putting that down as a Forest win. And then on to the next fixture, Spurs against Everton. As mentioned, Spurs were unlucky not to score more than one goal. I think they'll learn from that. They'll take their chances. Maybe Dom Solanke's debut goal will also come about in this match as well. Everton need to really sort out where they went wrong ASAP from last week, but I'm call that a Spurs win as well. Then on to the late afternoon, early evening game, well, late afternoon, shall we say, on Saturday, Aston Villa against Arsenal. Both are Champions League teams, and their campaigns will respectively start from mid-September onwards. With Aston Villa, kind of felt that with them, they were they unlucky to concede against West Ham? Who knows? But they're going to obviously at Villa Park be a formidable force. Unai Emery facing off against his former club, so he'd want to make an impression. Going to be a considerably tight match. And then Arsenal have that robust defence as well. In some ways, they'll probably cancel each other out, but I'll call that a narrow Arsenal win. Then on to the Sunday afternoon games. Got Bournemouth against Newcastle United. I think Bournemouth really were missing Dom Solanke last Saturday. And the Newcastle have that formidable attack. Hopefully, this time around, no early red cards. And we will see Gordon and Isak flourish. So should be a Newcastle United win. And on to Wolves and Chelsea. Wolves really, they've just seems like they've lost Pedro Neto. There's talk of them potentially getting another goalkeeper. Some have earmarked them as potential relegation candidates or thereabouts. And you've got Chelsea, who put in a reasonable showing against Man City on Sunday afternoon. But again, they've got these green block run of games, and Maresca would really want to make his impression felt early on. So I'll call that a narrow Chelsea win. And then on to Liverpool against Brentford. I think Brentford, in some ways, were lucky to get the result that they got last Sunday. And then Liverpool seemed to have that same momentum where they left off with Klopp, with Slot. And really, you've got to say that's a Liverpool win at home. And a fair few might also captain Mohamed Salah as well. So on to the captaincy polling data now. I asked who'll be your captain in FPL for game week 2. So I'm not asking who is the best FPL captain or who will score the most points. It's literally asking my own followers the captaincy pick of their choice. And now I only gave 2 options here, and I got some negative feedback as well, that why didn't I add Mohamed Salah in here as well? And to be fair, I probably should have, because Haaland isn't like owned by 80 to 90% overall, but among the engaged managers, I'll demonstrate he has got a very high ownership. So apologies, I should have added Salah in here as well. But as we can see, for those that are following me on X, just over 1,000 voted, and more than 8 in 10 are going to give Haaland the captaincy armband in game week 2. So that's definitely food for thought there as well. And I also wanted to bring in like expected FPL points data here from FPL Team as well. Of course, you've probably seen me showcasing a lot of their features throughout preseason as well. So according to their projections, the expected FPL points data for them is Haaland 8.27, Mohamed Salah 7.34. Further down, we've got De Bruyne, interestingly enough, just under 7 points. Eza with 5.91 points. And then Gvardiol with the same number there as well. You've got Son, just under 6 FPL points. Palmer with just under 6 as well. And then Saka with just under 6 as well. Edison showing here that very likely to potentially keep a clean sheet. Got Dom Solanke. I was talking about that potential opening debut goal for him in game week 2. Maybe he'll get it here, according to this FPL points data. Got Akanji looking fairly solid for a clean sheet, provided that he starts. Isak looking to get another fancy return here as well. And you've got Walker, interestingly enough, who obviously didn't start that opening game, rest from the Euros, but it'll be interesting to see if he starts. But if he does, he's projected to keep a clean sheet as well. Ruben Diaz there as well. And then just further down, Bruno Fernandes, potential FPL return for him as well. So it's interesting metrics there. So just going all the way back to the top for the number one expected FPL points player for game week 2, according to FPL.team, it was Haaland. So potential for what, 16 plus points if you captain him. Now, coming on to the engaged managers data from FPL Game Week. So with them, this is specifically from the Content Creators League, and pretty much all of them have Haaland in their team, but considerable amount don't have Mohamed Salah. And we can see here that ownership alone among the engaged managers is almost 100%, whereas if you go to the overall FPL statistics, he's down to 50%. And the projection I'm making in particular is specifically for the engaged and elite managers. So my projection is that for game week 2, Haaland will be the most popular captain among elite and engaged FPL managers, and I'm projecting that his effective ownership among those two groups will exceed 180%. And what that means is that if you captain him and he bangs in a hat trick, your overall rank will obviously skyrocket. Having said that, if you don't have Haaland, you've got Mohamed Salah, should potentially offer sufficient cover as well. So there you have it. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Do you feel that Haaland is the go-to pick? Was my Anthony Robinson transfer the no-nonsense move to make after the risk of Quanta's price dropping and me making that quick move? And as always, if you're able to like, share and subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated. Take care and all the best.